This may be a controversial take, but the PvE in Sea of Thieves is pretty darn good. No, seriously, think about it. If you're a new player sailing the seas, there's a plethora of content at your disposal. You got boss battles, puzzles, sea monsters, cargo runs, 3 full-fledged campaigns, fish. I can go on and on. However, if you've been playing Sea of Thieves for the last 7 or so years, I get it if you're disappointed with some of SOT's more recent updates. Why are they called the smugglers when nobody wants to loot their so-called smuggling? Look, I get why you're hungry. No, starved even for that lucid ice region to finally make its grand entrance. But just take a step back and look at Sea of Thieves as a complete package. There's a lot there. As such, today we'll be diving into the Sea of Thieves PvE scene. Even if you hate PvE more than a Smash Bros player hates showers, the truth is this: good PvE content is the backbone that keeps Sea of Thieves alive. In this video, we'll try to answer the following question: what ingredients makes for S-tier PvE content? There's a reason the Fort of the Dam and Fort of Fortune are still popular after half a decade, while the Skull of Sirens collects dust. FYI, we will be viewing PvE in the context of high seas. Let's jump in. When I first started playing Sea of Thieves all the way back in the grand year of 2021, the one thing I wish Rare would add was massive islands with Skyrim level quest. Think of a bunch of shores of gold-sized islands filled with the villagers, monsters, caves, secret bosses, etc. While I still think that sort of content would be awesome, the way in which Sea of Thieves is designed makes my innocent childhood dream just that, a dream. When you're out on an island la-di-dying around on your cute little buried treasure quest, there are monsters lurking in the shadows. I'm not talking about skeleton ships, megalodons, or your mother. No, I'm talking about other players. Players who want nothing more than to rob you dry and to leave your boat at the bottom of the sea floor. Whether you like it or not, in Sea of Thieves, PvE is directly tied to PvP. As such, we should look at PvE as a risk-reward system. How long do you have to spend off your boat to finish a quest? And is the loot worth the risk? Pretty much every island is designed with this philosophy in mind. Unless you're wandering around a cave or have your head buried in the sand, you can generally reach the shoreline or a high vantage point in a matter of seconds. This allows you to keep an eye on your boat and, more importantly, the horizon. If you're paying attention, you usually can spot hostile crews a mile before they are within cannon range. Look, even if you're 10 times better than your adversary, it's quite easy to sink when you're caught with your pants down. That's why the best PvE isn't just about skeletons or plunder. It's about how the content keeps you grounded in the wider sandbox, forcing you to balance risk and reward with overall game awareness. Let me give you a few examples. It's important to note that high quality PvE doesn't necessarily equate to massive gold payouts. Accommodations and unlockable cosmetics can be just as valuable. It really depends on the player and their goals. Also, if the PvE is fun, that's really all that matters. Anyway, I really like Phantom Forts. You take on a few waves of poltergeists and finish off the fight with the ghost captain. For your effort, you receive a solid payout of 15 to 25,000 gold without an emissary. There's also a map and clear view of the horizon from all directions. Plus, you have fortress cannons for defense, and besides an outpost, Phantom Forts are the best places to restock on supplies. Sea Forts were added back in 2022, and they remain very popular even 100 years later. That's simply because Sea Forts are good game design. Let me give you 2 examples of high-risk PvE missions that are slept on in 2025. Gold Hoarder Vaults and Merchant Lost Shipments. For both of these fetch quests, you're looking for clues that lead to the final treasure hoard. During Lost Shipments, you mainly stay on your boat and follow birds. For Vaults, you explore islands following a special compass. Reaching the final stage of these missions is straightforward and low stakes. The risk comes with moving the end of quest loot. How could we talk about good PvE content without mentioning the Fort of Fortune and Fort of the Dam? Both of these world events are old but very popular. Going through waves of rigged skeletons is only half the battle. The other half is the looming threat of enemy invasion. For both world events, albeit more so for the FOD, other players know that you are participating in the event and understand its value. While you typically have a solid view of the horizon from a skelly fort, fog, islands, and rocks hinder visibility. Plus, rowboat plays are common. I don't know if any piece of content can ever dethrone these events. Oh, and an honorable mention goes to The Legend of the Veil. Now that we've covered some of the positives, let's talk about some of the negatives. Siren treasuries and shrines. Don't get me wrong, the Sunken Kingdom is awesome. The aesthetic, the loot, the puzzles, the horde battles, amazing and so unique. Then why do players barely touch the underwater world anymore? To be blunt, the Atlantis missions don't mesh well with the overall design of Sea of Thieves PvE. Shrines are long, and if you're playing solo, you're forced to leave your ship exposed on the surface. Of all the content in Sea of Thieves, aquatic missions leave you the most vulnerable. Of course, if you're playing with others, you can leave a lookout man or drop one dude off to complete the quest. It's kind of a headache doing this, hence why shrines and siren treasuries, which are some of the most engaging content in SOT, are barely touched anymore. And that's the real lesson here. When thinking about new PvE content, it has to flow naturally into the sandbox, otherwise it won't last. Similar in design to the sunken treasuries are skeleton camps. In terms of sandbox flow, what makes camps superior to their sunken counterparts is that you can hear cannon shots above you. Combined with the nearby merfolk statue, this allows for immediate defense of your vessel. Following this example, Sunken Kingdom content would greatly benefit from an audio cue that notifies divers of nearby ships. Anyway, while we're on the subject of the Burning Blade, let's talk about the actual world event. The Burning Blade is excellent content, evident by the fact that players still occasionally man Flameheart's flagship a year post-implementation. On paper, the BB appears to be S tier on the same level as Fort of Fortune and Fort of the Dam. However, in practice, what really holds the Burning Blade back is its disconnection from the rest of the Sea of Thieves sandbox. I hope you really like skeleton camps, as it's pretty much the only thing you will be doing. What I, as well as many others, propose is giving BB crews the ability to complete regular voyages. I don't want to beat a dead horse, so I'll just say this. Integrating the Burning Blade into the broader sandbox would turn it into one of the best pieces of content in SOT history, from both a PvE and PvP point of view. Look, I could keep blabbling on and on about PvE for eternity. The point is this: superb PvE content naturally flows into the rest of the sandbox. If content is isolated from the rest of the game, history proves it doesn't last. However, even when PvE is well designed, its impact can still be undermined by one thing: inflation. When I say inflation, I'm talking about three things: gold-currency, loot, and quest frequency. So we gotta talk about the Skull of Sirens song. In the right setting, the Skull of Sirens is an amazing mission. After we conclude, I encourage you to look up some comp videos on the event. When everyone is doing Briggsy's quest, it's downright S tier. The Voyage is also integrated well into the open world, rewards players with solid ship cosmetics, and encourages competition. Under normal circumstances, however, Skull of Sirens is objectively bottom tier. It's way too frequent, plus there's diminishing returns on repeat playthroughs. These ingredients foster a boring world event. On my deathbed in 70 years, I'll probably forget who my wife, kids, and grandkids are. What I won't forget is hearing Briggsy screaming in my ears every 5 seconds.
Thank you for accepting this most adventurous of expeditions.
Even so, I do believe the Siren's Voyage can be saved with a couple of modifications. First, decrease its spawn frequency to once every 5 hours. Second, add a limited time cosmetic halfway through every season. Make the Skull of Siren a coveted item. The idea of reintroducing coveted treasure into SOT should be implemented across the board. It would give Voyages purpose. For example, what if every difficult voyage had a 10% probability of rewarding players with an ultra rare faction themed chest or trinket? Or what if 1 out of every 100 world events on the server had a pink hue, indicating its loot includes a new rare pink Athena chest? Coveted items do not have to be treasure either. It could take form in rare supplies, like the aforementioned Sea Fort subs, Meg and Kraken monster meat, or the Burning Blade Armada's Wraith Balls. Look, we need to go back to the level of hype and respect the Chest of Legends once brought to the game. You know, for years I would run into at least half a dozen players doing the previously discussed Gold Hoarder Vaults and Merchant Lost Shipment quest every single time I hopped on the game. Even though the Voyages are good game design, in 2025 they collect dust. Besides the lack of coveted items, gold inflation is another reason. Look, inflation is impossible to avoid in a 7-year-old game. But we can mitigate it by having more expensive ship skins and other cosmetics akin to the Dark Adventurer set. A small handful of dope ship sets, each worth 60 to 100 million gold, would go a long way in providing PvE with purpose. Before we begin wrapping things up, I have 2 more subjects I want to briefly address: PvE difficulty and diving-raid voyages. Throughout the years, Rare has retroactively gone back to old content and lowered its difficulty. I definitely get the idea behind doing this, and I don't necessarily believe it is a bad thing. I would argue, however, that some of the more worthwhile voyages should be turned up by 10 in challenge to reintroduce value and stake to said voyages. This topic could honestly be its own video. Let me know if you're interested in that. Also, not really sure how I feel about diving voyages. If it encourages people to actually play the game's content, that's great. But still, diving has created new challenges. While server hopping has pretty much always been a thing, the amount of players doing it in 2025 is unprecedented. I do question whether fast travel is decreasing the value of voyages or not. It's kind of rough when an HG sweat team appears out of nowhere a block away from you. No amount of horizon checking can effectively counter that. I dropped a video on Hourglass a couple of weeks ago that goes into practical ways Rare could mitigate this. Click the video in the top right corner of your screen if you would like to hear more on this topic. Sea of Thieves PvE is designed as a risk-reward system. If a quest has too much risk and not enough reward, it won't last. It doesn't matter how fun or unique a voyage is, if its design does not consider the SOT meta and flow smoothly into the rest of the game world, nobody will play it after a week. Even if PvE does follow this philosophy, gold, voyage, and content inflation can still kill player retention. The simple idea of reintroducing more rarity to Sea of Thieves would go a really long way. More recently, Rare has started re-evaluating older content, and I'm excited to see how far they go with this. Good PvE encourages players to explore the game world in unique ways, making for a more lively and robust adventure mode for both PvP and PvE players alike. Of course, this is just my oh-so-right opinion. Thank you for watching, and let me know what your favorite and least favorite voyages are down in the comments. If you didn't know, this video is actually the final part in a series. My next video will be shorter in length and will serve more or less as a series conclusion, just wrapping things up. Bye bye, GG.